Okay, perfect. I'm going to get going. So, hi, welcome. Welcome to this month's Loft Talk webinar. I want to talk today about how to measure impact and show the real value of digital PR. I ran this session at our Digital PR Summit event last month with some incredible feedback, some fantastic discussions afterwards. And it was clear that there was quite a bit of demand to run it again for people who either A couldn't make it or B were at the Digital PR Summit and were conflicted on which session to watch at which time. So I thought let's put it in as a webinar. Let's run through it again and give a chance to really this. I think this, I keep talking online about this is the expanded version of the talk I did at the Digital PR Summit because I believe it's one of the biggest issues and challenges we have in our industry right now. Not as PRs, but in terms of how we're positioned and how we're seen in that broader marketing mix. So, as a quick intro, hi, I'm James. For those of you who don't know me, I'm managing director and founder of Digitaloft. I've been doing SEO for coming up 17 years now. Spent 12 years running an agency. And back in about 2015, we started as a team to explore how to use PR to earn links for our clients. I mean, I'm an SEO through and through. Been in SEO, as I say, 17 years. And it never quite felt right that agencies were buying spammy links from overseas, were writing fake guest blogs to try and get them posted anywhere in the hope of a link. It's the reason why I believe, when I started out in SEO and moving into what we now call digital PR, that they were never really taken seriously. When I started out in SEO, SEO was seen as a manipulative channel. Business owners, CMOs saw it as a bit of a dark art. It certainly had no seat at the boardroom table in comparison to brand marketing. Thankfully, now it does. But I think, but the fact that we started out figuring out how to use PR to earn links and grow our clients' brands on search in 2015, 2016 really means that I've been doing digital PR since before anyone called it digital PR. To us, it was content-led link building back in the day, evolved to digital PR since, and I think that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool to be saying I've been doing digital PR since before anyone called it digital PR. I was one of the founders of the Digital PR Summit back in 2020, which last month we welcomed over 500 people to Manchester for a fantastic full day PR conference to really, I think we launched it to give this industry something more than a few talks tagged on to SEO conferences. And I think it's mission achieved, mission accomplished. It was a fantastic event, and we had some great sessions talking about some really, really important issues. But today I'm here to talk about measurement, and digital PR has a measurement problem. This isn't a new thing, but I believe that the fact that digital PR has a measurement problem is why it feels so often, so commonly that it's the first thing that brands will question. It's the first thing that often gets cut when marketing budgets need to get cut, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the reality is that the channel for so long now has been measured on the wrong things. It's had a measurement problem. And we need to do as an industry something about it. We need to start talking openly about how to measure and show the impact of the channel beyond the ways that we've traditionally done it. And talking about that, traditionally, for too long, as digital PRs, as SEOs, digital PR as a tactic has been measured by things like the volume of links and coverage earned, the DR or DA of linking domains, cost per link, or how many follow versus no follow links were earned as a result of the activity. Now, don't get me wrong, bar cost per link, I don't really have an issue with any of these as ways of measuring PR activity. And I think ultimately, you're always better to be measuring something than nothing. But the challenge comes when we really take a step back and realize that none of these things are actually things that a business cares about. These measure what PR did, not what PR achieved and what the outcomes that it contributed to were. None of these things prove value or impact. I think, we're hopefully no secret to anybody watching today that the number of links does not correlate with what sort of a contribution those links had to increased visibility. When you work to numbers, those numbers could be absolute garbage links. They could be paid links. They could be links that are, in many cases, being completely ignored by Google, by LLMs, and having absolutely no influence. And I think ultimately, we have to break this down to the things that matter to us as executors, as the people doing the work, to say, are we achieving something for our work? Are we seeing what we need to see to be able to show that we're doing what we said we would? And I think there's internal measures and there's external measures. And I think what ultimately what we need to get better at is being in a position to communicate the value of what we do in the language a business talks about. So the reality is that your CEO doesn't care how many links you earned. Your CMO doesn't care about DR. And sorry, but your CFO has never heard of a no-follow link. Yet we still report in this way. We still share reports that showcase, or at least, yes, we report, but we also avoid having conversations on education on how our work ladders up. And then we end up in difficult conversations where a CFO says, okay, we need to shave X amount off a marketing budget. And the report that is put on their desk shows we got 5 follow links. It's absolutely meaningless. That work could have and probably did contribute massively to increased revenue, to increased visibility. But if we're talking in a different language to the business, we will always struggle to get the buy-in and support we need. Ultimately, stakeholders, the people who make decisions, they care about what happened because of digital PR. Things like revenue, ROI, and visibility against competitors. But in the simplest sense, the stakeholders, the people who make decisions, want to know whether the money they put in, the money they gave the channel, the agency, the provider, got them more money back. Did it turn into a positive ROI? That's, I think, the simple measure that many stakeholders will judge the impact and effectiveness on. They don't care about the number of links, they care what that contributed to. And as PRs, as SEOs, we have to get better at laddering up the work we do to showing how it impacts broader business metrics that the business cares about. And we can break this all down to the fact that digital PR should make you money. Now, here's the thing. I genuinely believe that our industry does so much good work. I believe that there's far more digital PR work that does make businesses money than doesn't make them money. But I think often we're done a bit of a disservice because we're not talking about it in the same language as the business. So actually, whilst we know we're contributing, whilst we're doing some great work, at the end of the day, stakeholders often look at it as prove to me that this made us money. And that's what I want to talk about today. But before I get on to talking through a framework on how to measure impact of digital PR, how to show that business outcomes were influenced by digital PR, we have to talk about two different types of goals, both of equal importance, but very, very different. Owned goals, the things digital PR teams control directly. Things like link and coverage volume, link and coverage quality, and link and coverage relevance. That is on the digital PR team. It is on the digital PR team to make sure that their work they're doing is delivering some sort of volume. And, it is absolutely not a numbers game, but the reality is that we need to see some sort of consistent coverage of the right quality and the right relevance. We have to be found and seen and covered in the right places with enough reach at enough volume to have an impact. They are on the digital PR team. They're the things that the digital PR team can control directly by their strategy and the work they do. We then have shared goals. These are the things that digital PR teams influence but don't own. Things like rankings, traffic, and revenue. Yes, digital PR has a huge influence on these things. Rankings drive targeted traffic, which in turn turns into revenue. But so do other things. On-page SEO, content, tech SEO, wider brand marketing. Multiple things influence the shared goals. And if we only talk about shared goals, what happens is that rankings dip, a core update happens, natural volatility happens, and somebody's quickly pointing the finger at digital PR saying, well, you didn't earn enough links to do that. It's not how it works. It influences it. And what I'm going to show you over the next 20 minutes is how we can showcase the impact of digital PR to prove that we had an influence on this. If we talk about only owned goals, we get where I started, that people question, okay, well, you earned us 20 links this quarter, but what does that actually mean? How did that ladder up to business income, business inputs and outputs? But what we also have to consider, certainly in a team environment, and when we think about managing teams, managing agencies, is that as in many parts of marketing, what gets measured gets done. If the goal we set is around the volume of links and coverage, the underlying narrative and message and brief is do whatever will earn as many links and pieces of coverage as possible. But if the measurement framework, the goals and the brief is based on the impact of links and coverage, then naturally what happens is we do whatever will earn links and coverage that impact the goals. It sounds like a subtle shift, but it makes a massive, massive difference. And how we set goals, how we talk about what we do and how it's measured, ultimately, subconsciously determines how our teams, how our suppliers respond. If as a brand we're saying we are judging the success of this on volume, then the supplier and the agency is incentivized to go and earn as many links and pieces of coverage as possible. From my 17 years in SEO, I will confidently say that nobody wants links on their own. Lots of people will say they want links, but they don't. They want the impact they believe or know those links can deliver. So actually, the goal should be the impact of links and coverage, which in turn feeds down to the goal being do whatever will earn the links and coverage that impact our goals. If that means fewer links and fewer pieces of coverage, but have a greater impact, great. It'll contribute to business impact. But also, I think how we frame measurement. So often in my career, I've seen measurement and reporting referenced as an afterthought. It's seen as a way to show that we did something and didn't just sit around twiddling our thumbs. But I think it's the wrong approach. Measurement is a feedback tool and it gives us rapid feedback and insight to know whether or not our strategy is working. We need to reframe how we think about measurement, and rather than it being a prove what we've done, primarily we should be using it as a feedback tool. Have we deployed the right strategy? If we have, great, let's do more of it. If it's not, then we need to change something up. Measurement lets us pretty quickly see whether what we're doing is the right thing to do. And if it's not, we can pivot. That's what generates business outcomes. But if we want to measure effectively, we have to start from the goal, not the tactics. So often I see briefs talked about in the context of we need to earn links or we need to do digital PR. But actually, the goal should be it should start with the goal, sorry, and it needs to be we need to achieve this as a business. And then only do you ladder down to say, this is how digital PR can ladder up to that. And I think, what we have to accept and understand is that digital PR outputs are not the same as business outcomes. The moment we separate these things, we're ahead of miles of the industry. We're positioning ourselves as strategic advisors who are able to talk in the language of business, not just the language of digital PR and SEO. Digital PR outputs are important. I'm absolutely not saying we should stop tracking the coverage we get, whether they're follow, no follow. Absolutely not what I'm encouraging at all. What I'm encouraging is the ability and the mindset that separates digital PR outputs from business outcomes, and that we all get better at showcasing the impact of our work on the business outcomes, because those two aren't the same thing. And that starts by asking what I believe is a very, very powerful question that we don't ask enough, which is what does the business actually want to sell more of? We don't ask that often enough. But when we do, It tells us whether the business wants to sell more of a certain category, what has a higher margin, what the business can actually feed stock of. I've worked with brands many times in my career where if demand doubled in the product category, they couldn't cope with the demand. They couldn't sell that. But if it was in another range, they could. This is nothing to do with digital PR. This is business and marketing strategy and asking what does the business want to sell more of. Because if we know that, we can then build a strategy by working backwards from that. If we don't do this, we're going blind. We're making assumptions on what we should be doing digital PR around, the topics we should be focusing on. And if we don't start with this, it becomes very, very difficult to later try and join things up when that conversation wasn't had from day one. But we have to understand the role of digital PR. And I think ultimately, again, if we work backwards from revenue, a business wants to make more money, it wants to drive revenue. That comes from driving qualified traffic, which in turn comes from commercial pages being more visible. Digital PR sits under that. Digital PR ladders up and influences the visibility of commercial pages, which in turn drives more qualified traffic, which turns into more revenue. Too often we start with digital PR rather than understanding the role it plays in driving business outcomes, ultimately revenue. And anyone who's heard me speak before will know this is a drum I've been banging for a long, long time now, that PR activity must be topically aligned to the pages it's meant to influence. This is where I think so much digital PR could be working harder by taking the time to understand the business's wider goals, what they want to sell more of, and better integrating it to SEO strategy. To answer that question on if a business wants to sell more of X, Y, or Z, and the pages that that revenue will come from, and in turn, we need to be more visible, then that's what we need to be talking about. They're the topics we need to be building offsite signals around. And we need to align the topicality of PR activity with the target pages, but also the terms you want to rank for. We can see this almost as a trio of focus areas to align the relevance of. We align our PR activity with the target pages and the commercial search terms. There's no point in, just think of an example, there's no point in running PR activity to promote sofas if a furniture retailer's highest priority is selling more beds. When we align everything, the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the two parts. We need to think about it like this and how can we join everything up? And it starts with having conversations about what the business actually wants to achieve and sell more of. It also means that we avoid this. I don't think I'll ever stop giving this example. An online casino sharing expert insights around the UK's hay fever hotspots. I've thought about this for a long time and I've used it in many talks. I've given it in many training sessions on probably the worst case of relevance that I've ever seen. On the fact that we cannot draw any comparison between hay fever and online casinos. Ultimately, this is what happens when our goal is to earn as many links as possible in a sector like gaming, where the focus becomes how can we do anything to earn some links because we're being judged on how many links we earn. I can almost guarantee this is having absolutely no impact on the visibility for an online casino brand. Take this in comparison to a piece of coverage we earned at Digitaloft back in March for a for a travel insurance brand that wanted us to focus on cruise insurance. This was a piece of coverage and a link that we earned on the Virgin Voyages cruise line website, linking back to our client's site around the topic of cleanest cruise lines. Let's not forget that one of the, a topic on the news right now, that, one of the main reasons that people take out comprehensive cruise insurance is for illness and accidents, those sort of things around a cruise. We're breaking out travel insurance to cruise insurance to go, what are the topics? Why do people take out that and what may they use cruise insurance for? And as a result, we earned an incredibly relevant link from the Virgin Voyages website, which I think when digital PR is done right, it's a money could not buy link. This is not an editorial that you could influence with affiliates. anywhere you could buy links. This is true editorial coverage on a business's blog. But then if we break this out, and I think, one of the things that again, I think sometimes don't talk about enough is when we look at that role, come back to the role of digital PR and how it sits in that chain of growth, is in an ideal world, every link and piece of coverage we earned would link directly to the pages we want to rank. But that isn't reality. That's not how editorial coverage works. And I think sometimes what we see, and, we forget, is that to influence visibility, we can either earn links, relevant links directly into a page, or we can earn them into related content assets, blog pages, campaign pages, which in turn internally link through to pass those contextual signals and that authority. When we get this right, this results in things like this. The impact of our work with this brand was taking the rankings for cruise insurance from position 6 to position 2 in a couple of months. And ultimately, this is a mix of relevance plus authority plus volume, earning links from the right topics into the right pages of the site, contributing to increased rankings, which drove more traffic, which in turn drove more revenue. But what we need to think about when building a strategy, and again, one of my personal topics of interest is strategy. And I think, a personal frustration of mine is that strategy and tactics are so commonly confused. And when we look at digital PR, we need to ask ourselves a question on the balance between authority, relevance, and volume. I genuinely believe that to drive growth with links, mentions, coverage, digital PR as a whole, it's a balancing act between authority, relevance, and volume. And every sector is different, every SERP is different, but we have to know what the gap is that we're trying to close. Is the competitor who's owning the SERPs right now winning on authority? Are they winning on relevance? Have they got a more relevant link profile? Or are they winning on volume? Usually it's a combination of all three. But I've worked with many brands over my career where they have great authority, but they're not performing because they have a relevance issue. The digital PR work they've done in the past just isn't relevant enough to the areas they're trying to influence. If we don't know the gap we're trying to close, how do we know what to do? If we need to drive authority, if we need to drive volume and relevance, they're going to be different strategies. They're going to be different approaches, different types of work that drive those. So we need to know what the gap is that we're trying to close. But again, bringing this all together, we start with business outcomes. This comes from rankings for buying terms, which are influenced by increasing the authority and topicality of target pages. One of the things that came out of Google's algorithm leak 2 years ago now is, and as well as the DOJ trial that Google went through, is how Google understands the topicality of a page. No surprise that one of the topicality signals Google uses is links. Google uses links to understand what a page is about. So if we're going and earning and driving irrelevant links and pieces of coverage that are part of a site, that's sending conflicting signals. That's sending confusing signals to say, actually, this site might be about something that is different to what the page says. Some of the parts about relevance that we don't talk about often enough. This authority and topicality comes from earned links and mentions. Again, digital PR sits right at the bottom of this ladder, but it ultimately powers the results we need to see. So to talk through a measurement framework, I believe that we can measure the impact of digital PR in what I refer to as 3.5 layers. The business layer, the search layer, the digital PR layer, and the bonus layer. The bonus layer will make sense in a few minutes. The business layer is being able to answer questions and say things like organic revenue is up by X% year on year for this category. Organic traffic to the certain category is up by so and so year on year. Or we're hitting this percent of our revenue potential from search in the category up from Y last quarter. At this stage, this is nothing to do with digital PR. This is about how the business made more money. And that's what we start with. When we start with these sort of statements, these sort of data points, people pay attention. This is ultimately what the people we're presenting to want to hear us talk about. And I think think back many a time in earlier in my career where it became very obvious that I was sat in a quarterly review, an annual review, where I was talking links, mentions. The person I was presenting to wanted me to talk about revenue. And I think the sooner we accept that there is often this disconnect, we're able to put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are either working from us, working with us, they're employing us, they're managing us, to say what do they expect to see here? It's rarely links and mentions, unless we're maybe talking about a PR exec being managed by a digital PR manager. The search layer is talking the next level down. It's being able to say things like rankings for our priority terms increased by an average of X this quarter. We're now holding position Y for priority commercial term up from this last quarter or last month, or we're being recommended by certain AI platform for this category. Again, this isn't tied to Google. This isn't tied to traditional search. We can apply this same focus on AI visibility and start to show that our work has contributed to that visibility. But again, you'll notice that even at this second layer of the measurement framework, I'm not talking about links, I'm not talking about mentions. I'm talking about the things that contribute to the business impact. Only then do we get to the digital PR layer, where we then start to say things like we earned this many links that are topically aligned to a certain category. However many of these linked either directly or indirectly to our priority pages, or we've reduced the link gap with a certain competitor from A to B. This is where digital PR fits in the measurement framework. It comes once we ladder down from outcomes to what ultimately delivered those outcomes, which was rankings and traffic. Only then do we start to talk about how we influence that and how our work contributed to that. But then we have that bonus layer that I talked about. And I think, we should be shouting about all of the impacts from our work. And I think, whilst in a lot of cases, digital PR is set up to influence SEO success, visibility on the SERPs, we absolutely should not be ignoring the other things that it drives. Being able to say referral traffic from the coverage and links we secured has driven X in revenue, either directly or via affiliates. In digital PR, we don't often take credit as much as we should for driving affiliate revenue, especially in e-commerce for product roundups now. So much of it is driven by PR activity that the publications are then monetizing with affiliate links. If that's making money, the PR team should get credit for that. We should be using it as bonus metrics to show we contributed to all of this, but we also did this. Being able to say we saw a spike in brand searches the week after a campaign launched, or that a campaign was shared by so and so influencer on social and reached this many people. These are often the byproducts of digital PR. That they're not the primary goal in many cases. The primary goal when we're talking about revenue is to show how we made more money. But we shouldn't shy away from showing that bigger picture and building out the story to show that we didn't just contribute to increased search visibility, we also did this, this, and this. But that's not enough because we have to be able to answer when somebody says, great, prove it. Prove those links and pieces of coverage that you earned contributed to those rankings and that increase in revenue. But we can and we should be doing that. And the first approach to do this, and the first way we can do this, is to isolate out the pages you're trying to influence. A mistake that is often made in reporting and measurement is to take a look at the whole site and show site-wide traffic was up by 5%, 10%. Site-wide traffic is pretty meaningless because it doesn't allow us any level of granularity to isolate out what we did versus what we saw. So the most effective approach I've seen in my career here and used is to isolate out the pages you're trying to influence and showcase the metrics of your choice. That can be revenue, sessions, ideally both, to show how the pages or site sections that you targeted trended in comparison to both site-wide and sections of the site that you didn't earn links into. When we're able to do that, we're able to often show how The pages that were intending to influence, that we earned links pointing into either directly or indirectly, grew at a faster rate in terms of revenue and traffic than both the site-wide and those that didn't. We're starting to build a picture that's really hard to argue with and hard to debate with of did or didn't this contribute. We're just proving that the work we did laddered up to the things that we saw as business outcomes. But we should also be showing how the competitive gap is closing, whether we're talking DR, relevance, number of referring domains. Another way to prove the work we did is to show how a gap is closing. Show how we're closing in on competitors, competing against competitors. And again, these metrics in isolation don't tell you the full story, but what we're doing here is we're using them as proof and evidence that the growth we saw in revenue, in rankings, in traffic was influenced significantly by the digital PR work we did. Ultimately, when we look at this and bring it all together, we can break this down to shared and owned goals that I talked about right at the start. And we can see these as the business layer. That's all about revenue, traffic, share of revenue potential from search. The search layer, it's all about commercial keyword rankings, AI platform visibility. The digital PR layer, that's where we talk about earned links and mentions, volume, relevance, authority. A lot of the ways that as digital PRs we've traditionally measured and reported. And then the bonus layer showing how we drove things like referral traffic and revenue, brand search spikes, or social shares and engagement. Bringing this together is a really effective framework that shows what the work we did as digital PRs delivered beyond just a list of links, a list of pieces of coverage. They're the PR activity, but what we should be showing is how they connected to the things the business cares about. So if we then pull this all together, here's an example of what this looks like when we're able to effectively showcase this and work backwards. Organic revenue in the category is up by 68%, up $6,500 year on year. And organic traffic to the category is up by 48%, plus 1,000 year on year. Rankings for the category's target commercial terms are up an average of 6 positions compared to last quarter. And this means we now hold top 3 rankings for 9 of our 20 high priority terms, and all are now in the top 10 on Google US. This is up from 6 top 3 rankings and 16 in the top 10 last quarter. We're showing progress and laddering it up and working backwards. Referral traffic from ChatGPT is up by 1,189% year on year, and we're consistently being recommended as the best option by ChatGPT. Again, we're not just showing referral traffic from the AI LLM, we're also showing how we're consistently recommended as one of the best options. Only then do we talk about how we did this. Well, we earned 165 topically relevant links directly or indirectly into the category's priority commercial pages since we were working on this. With headlines such as why cruise insurance is going up in 2026, new report reveals $538 average, cruise insurance prices go overboard, the top 10 claims travel insurance won't cover on a cruise. The relevance is there. We're showcasing how we earn topically relevant links that in turn delivered more visibility for commercial pages from ranking for commercial terms, which in turn drove more traffic that wants to buy. And then we get the proof the digital PR influence grows. If we look at the category we were trying to influence, we saw revenue up 68%, traffic up 48%. Site-wide, revenue was down 1.5%, and in a category that wasn't touched with links or PR activity was down 16%. Making comparisons makes it really easy to see that the priority areas we were trying to influence actually delivered the results that were needed to be seen. Ultimately, talking about digital PR success, measuring, showing impact is all about talking in the right language to the right people. When we're talking upwards to stakeholders, key shareholders in a business, people who make decisions, we want to be talking in shared goals, talk in the business language, and then ladder what we did, the PR activity under that, to show how that contributed to it. When we're talking inwards to the team, we should be talking in owned goals. The relevance of the coverage we earned, the volume of the coverage, closing link gaps, closing coverage gaps, being featured in roundups where our competitors are. That shouldn't change, but the way we talk within a team, a PR team, should be very different to how we talk upwards to stakeholders because both teams care about very, very different things. And that's right, they should care about different things, but we need to get better at using the right language to the right people. Ultimately, owned metrics are what run the team. Owned metrics are what make PR activity happen and the right activity happen. Shared metrics tell the story. Ultimately, we need to be able to answer these questions. And if you can, then you can be pretty confident that your digital PR measurement model works. And those questions are what's the business trying to sell more of? What gaps is digital PR trying to close? Which pages are the priority? How are these pages trending versus the rest of the site? And is the gap closing? If at any point in running digital PR activity, regardless of whether that's as an agency, as an in-house member of a digital PR team, as an SEO, we need to know these things. These are the data points that we should have access to, that we should be looking at, that we should be measuring. Because yes, they let us tell the story, but they also let us gain that feedback on whether the strategy we're rolling out is the right one or whether it needs shifting. Ultimately, we need to stop measuring outputs and start measuring outcomes and talk in the language of how we've used digital PR to influence the things the business actually cares about. This is nothing to do with the work we're doing. It's how we showcase that and how we get the credit our channel deserves. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Digital PR should make you money. Measurement is what proves it. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to load up the chat window now and see whether we have any. Yeah, we do. Okay. So a question I've had in is how do you manage expectations for a niche B2B client, e.g., specialized construction, who refuses to broaden their topic horizons yet expects the same volume or authority metrics as a broad B2C brand? How do you shift their measurement mindset from quantity to quality? So I think that's a really, really good question. And I think it's a challenge that most of us have faced at one point or another. Now, I think broadly speaking, the solution to this is to firstly have conversations around the types of publication that are actually going to drive impact, the types of publication that are relevant. I've done this with brands a number of times and showcased that the number of publications that some niche B2B stories can chase after, that can go, that could potentially land in, is much, much smaller than some of the broader B2C. And I think ultimately it's, why I always start with what does the business want to sell more of? There is ultimately the way that you move from that to say, right, okay, if we want to sell more of this, what's the sort of sphere of relevance? What's that radius of relevance of the things we want to be talking about? Start to then use the tools that we all use. BuzzSumo is great for this to understand, okay, well, realistically, how many publications and journalists are talking about this? I remember having a conversation with a brand in the sports betting space where we were comparing the potential to earn coverage for football versus horse racing and versus darts. And once we started to pull the figures, it was very, very clear that there's about, I think it was about 35 times as many stories are published every month on football as there is darts, and about 50 times as many on horse racing. So instantly, what we're doing is we're using data to showcase the only way we're going to get more coverage is by going off topic. When we go off topic, we have a real risk of damaging a brand's topicality. But I think ultimately it comes back to asking the question and being confident having conversations around does it make sense for the business to be talking about this topic or this topic? Often it doesn't. Does it make sense for an online casino to be talking about hay fever? Not at all. There's really no way we can link the two. It's not talking about odds. It's a blatant attempt to try and earn links from anywhere. And I think once you ask them that question on, does it make sense for this business to be talking about these topics? If the answer is no, that can be a really powerful way to shape expectation. It's common in B2B. I think, over my career, I've typically found that you will earn fewer links for B2B. Um, but then looking at competitor link profiles again, they are often smaller with a few exceptions than broader B2C. Hopefully that helps. Another question I've had in is how do you incorporate Gen AI metrics and the growing importance of citations versus blue links? Really, really great question. And I think one of the points I covered there is that, we can run this same framework around recommendations in ChatGPT AI mode as an example. And I think the key differentiation we have to make there is that there is a big issue, I'll say it in this industry right now, of misunderstanding the difference between citations and recommendations. A lot of the AI tool providers have latched onto you're being cited, your content's being cited. Honestly, who cares? What's valuable to a business is being recommended. When somebody asks for a recommendation of a product or service, when or where you are being recommended in that. The great thing about ChatGPT AI mode is we can see the type of sources that are being used to influence that. So, talking about a project that we've been working on recently, working with a pizza oven retailer, a D2C pizza oven brand. We've had phenomenal impact on their visibility in both traditional and AI search by focusing on getting them included in the editorial roundups on The Telegraph, on T3, on Country Living magazine. More and more publications are doing these roundups because they get cited and they then drive traffic. Don't forget, publications are they largely run an advertising and affiliate model. They want more traffic to the page. So we can apply the same approach on are we being featured in the sources that LLMs pull their recommendations from? And then in turn, are we being recommended? If we're not being recommended, then we need to reverse engineer and figure out where do we need to be found? What do we need to do to influence that? And I think the wider measurement model is the same. The challenge we have is that a lot of AI influence doesn't necessarily come directly through referral traffic in the same way as we've all seen organic search. So it's tying that, are we being recommended to, well, are we seeing more brand search? Are we seeing more brand search for brand plus category? And I think, as we go through the next couple of years, I think, we will ultimately see better ways of measuring the commercial impact of AI visibility come through. But I think right now we've got to look at from a visibility perspective and are we influencing visibility in the surface when people are searching who want to buy, rather than just taking citation numbers and saying, well, we're cited this many times in the sidebar links. Um, because a lot of the time it's not commercially meaningful and we're still in the hype era where it's yay, we've been cited 200 times in ChatGPT. What does that actually mean? Were you recommended when it matters? Are you being recommended consistently? And yes, LLMs are probabilistic. They don't give the same response every time. They're designed that way. But if we start to track over time, one of the things that we've been working on at Digitaloft is building our own AI tracking tools that will run 10, 50, 100 versions of a prompt to see if we run this 100 times, knowing the LLM will give different responses, slightly different responses every time, are we showing up the majority of the time? Again, there is still a cost to this. It's not cheap to connect to the APIs at scale, to run hundreds, thousands into the tens or hundreds of thousands of prompts through to collect the data. And I think we still have to ask that is it is the cost of measuring that granular worth it? I'm not saying if it is or isn't. It depends very, very much on sector. I was talking to someone this morning about how we've got some sectors where LLM visibility is driving significant amount of leads and business, and it can be verifiable. If you're a service business, then having on a contact form where you were discovered at, adding ChatGPT LLMs to that is driving some fantastic self-attribution that I've seen so many businesses using to be able to say, this person and this person found us on ChatGPT. Probably more impactful than going, we had a share of X, Y, or Z right now. This will change. It will change quite quickly. Every month, we're seeing huge developments in the capabilities to measure. Um, we're still very, very early. And I think, apply the same mindset. What can we show to prove that our work influenced that? And we go from there. Hopefully that helped. I don't think we've any more questions. I think we've had. No, we've got one more. Which tools would I recommend for digital PR measurement in 2026? Well, I think that ultimately comes back to what are you trying to measure? I think ultimately, when we talk about measuring revenue, it's whatever platform the business is using to measure revenue from search, from referrals, working down that process that I shared before. And for most businesses, that's still GA4. I know a lot of businesses are starting to consider moving away from that. We've had a number of clients in the last few weeks move away from GA4 onto other platforms. I think there's no real consensus yet because of some of the various limitations that they're seeing on that. And digital PR measurement in 2026, I think, I am still a massive, massive fan of Ahrefs for anything link metric related. The challenge is still link relevance. How do we measure the relevance of links? There is a way to do that based on Google's documented guidelines, and I've spent the last 18 months building a tool to do that. Keep an eye on our socials, keep an eye on, connect with me on LinkedIn if I'm not. There will be some stuff coming on that. It's a challenge that our industry has had. It's a challenge that we've done bits on it before, and I think we got about 80% of the way there. We've now got 100% of the way there. We've been looking at that internally to how do we measure relevance. But relevance is the challenge. Volume of quality and authority still Ahrefs to me. Um, it's not really much of a different tool stack. When we talk about AI, we could talk all day. I think there's loads of tools that are going places, some that are a waste of money. But I think again, it depends what you want to get out of that. The last question we've just had come in is, say you're an in-house team where sites are generally underperforming relative to what the digital PR team produces. We get good links and coverage, relevant and authoritative outlets, but then it's not translating to these outcomes. How do you balance reporting in terms of these own goals versus share goals to avoid a CFO type figure, seeing the digital PR team getting good results, but then it not translating into rankings, traffic, and revenue? Okay, so I think that's where working backwards from these shared goals is really important because I believe if a digital PR team is getting great links and coverage that are relevant and authoritative, then there's probably another issue at play. And I think, again, showcasing working collaboratively with teams, I'm a big fan of digital teams collectively working together to solve challenges like this rather than trying to pin the blame on one team or another. There is always a reason why a site isn't performing. And I think, the reality is, and I've said many times, that digital PR is not a magic wand. It never has been, never will be. It will not compensate for technical issues, content quality. The amount of conversations I have right now around content quality and how Google has shifted the goalposts significantly in the past few years on the content deemed good enough to rank at the top of the SERPs. So I think coming together as teams to bring all our experience together to share their insights and figure out what is holding us back. Because the reality is that until the challenges that are holding a site's performance back are fixed, then digital PR will not have the impact it could or should. But I think that's why, holistically, everyone coming together to show here is the value we bring. Collectively, we are here to drive growth for the business. Let's all come at this and figure out the issues. Let's try and prove that digital PR is earning authoritative, relevant links in comparison to what you're competing against. Again, looking at cross-referencing with competitors to be able to, to answer that question on to the best of our ability, we're confident that digital PR is producing what should have an impact. It's almost a process of elimination. We are confident that this should be having an impact. It's not. What is it that's holding us back? Hopefully that answered that. And I've just had one more question come in, which is how often are you creating campaigns? How many campaigns would you recommend a year to see movement? Fortunately, that's impossible to answer without knowing the sector, the competitive landscape, what's been done in the past. I think ultimately it's strategy. That's digital PR strategy, which is understanding what do we need to do to close a gap and compete. I think, but the reality there, and, I apologize for not being able to answer your question maybe as strongly as you'd like me to, but I think it comes back to being able to look at and say, in this competitive landscape, we are underperforming on relevance, authority, volume, two of them, all of them, and understanding those gaps with who you're competing against to be able to map out realistically, we have a relevance problem. Therefore, we need to change the relevance profile, our links profile topicality. We are realistically going to need X pieces of relevant coverage to do that, to change the perception. Same with volume, same with authority. And it's that strategy. And that's, I guess, understanding a true link gap analysis, coverage gap analysis, if we come into AI search, to be able to map out to compete with who we're competing against, here is what we need to do. I think only then can we answer them questions. And I think it's also why, we as a sector, we need to get better at diagnosing the actual issues that are holding us back, holding our sites back, to be able to prescribe based on what we're seeing, we need to do this, this, or this. Hopefully that helps. Be more than happy to have a conversation with some more details. But yeah, bringing it back to strategy. That's what strategy is. Strategy is being able to say, based on what we need to achieve and the competitive landscape and how we perform, this is what we need to do. Perfect. Well, that's all the questions. Thank you very much for those. Thank you very much for listening, for attending. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Always happy to chat. And in the meantime, please check out our upcoming webinars. We've got our very own Amy Gibson presenting a webinar very soon on product PR. So make sure you don't miss that. It's a really, really great session. So from me, thank you very much. Yeah, always appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.